At the top of the show, we told you about the political fight in Washington over the next COVID relief bill, and also we gave you an idea of the financial pain that tens of millions of Americans are dealing with. Well, in this segment, we're going to take a look at it from the 30,000-foot view and also what Washington could do to address the financial crisis we're in. Now, the latest numbers show that the U.S. economy is in full freefall. It contracted by nearly 10% in the second quarter, making it the worst three-month stretch in American history. Personal spending also fell by double digits during that quarter. Salaries shrunk by more than 7%. My next guest says if D.C. doesn't go big, the situation could get a whole lot worse. He just wrote a piece in the Washington Monthly that shows you where he stands. The headline, Trump and the Republicans risking an all-out depression. They are currently making the same failed choices that led to the last one. Let's bring him in. Robert Shapiro, he's a former economic advisor to both Presidents Clinton and Obama. And it's got a whiff. Not long ago, I went up to Hyde Park, and I was doing something with the folks with the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Institute. And the haunting echoes of Hoover before the Depression and where we are now, there was a choice, there was a chance to go big before it got really bad. And they said, thanks, but no thanks. We're in that same window now. It's bad, but I think people mistakenly think this is as bad as it could get. It could get much worse, couldn't it, Robert?
Absolutely. Just think about the basic numbers here. The economy contracted almost 10%, and that was with $2 trillion worth of government support and stimulus. Now, it contracted at that rate because the pandemic forced large parts of the economy to shut down. Well, we are now seeing the pandemic resurgence, and we are also beginning to see more parts of the economy shut down and other parts that were ready to open not opening. In that context, to reduce the support that was necessary in order to limit the decline in GDP to 10% at this point risks a very serious spiral down. It is precisely what Herbert Hoover did.
You know, Robert, some of my conservative friends, and I've heard this now for a while, my God, we're paying people more to stay home than to get to work. In effect, they're saying, without saying the words, throwing good money after bad. Now, I can tell them, listen, whatever these people are taking home, this whole idea of this welfare queen argument, I'm sure we'll find examples, but they're spending the money back into the economy, even at higher rates than when they were working. And secondly, you want to see scary? You give people with little hope no hope. And what do you think is going to happen in a pandemic? Having people having to go to food banks here and worried about keeping the lights on, or to paying the rent, or to making, the basic mortgage payment. I mean, that's lunacy. Take all ethics and morality out of it. But I get this sense that people don't get how close we are to seeing this thing go from really bad to worse. And I know you laid out the economics of it, but 40% of people, before we even heard the word COVID, had less than $400 to deal with an emergency. There's this misconception that there's cushions out there that don't exist.
No, that's exactly right. There is this remarkable cognitive dissonance among much of the public, and certainly among the Republican Party, about the seriousness of the pandemic, both in human terms and in economic terms. And that cognitive dissonance led to the resurgence of the virus because people didn't wear a mask, they didn't social distance, which has now produced the prospect of this spiral down if Congress is so self-destructive as to not pass a very large support and stimulus bill.
To get into what it should look like, but I think if we're going to be honest, a lot of folks think, hey, you know what? It's only happening, it's the inner city folks here. They're not our electorate. I got news from McConnell. He goes to Appalachia. He goes to a lot of part of this country in the industrial sector. It isn't just Democrats and communities of color. It's a whole lot of white folk, too, and a whole lot of red states. This is across the board. There's a major miscalculation. Who are the folks, I think, Robert, who are at risk here of having a whole new reality real quick if the checks stop coming?
Absolutely. Look, the fact is, if you get a spiral down, the impact is not going to be limited to those who are without work today. Unemployment will rise, more businesses will fail. We will also do structural damage to the economy. That is, eliminate so many businesses that have produced goods and services that when the pandemic finally does end, the recovery will be very slow and very halting, and most of the country will suffer.
So let's talk about, let's have an alternative universe here, okay? And Biden says, Robert, I need you to give me a half an hour. And when you do, tell me if I want to do New Deal 2.0, what is the best infusion of money I can put into the economy to get it going again that A, will help people, but also more broadly accelerate the recovery of the economy? What would it look like?
Well, the first task is to stop the spiral down. And for that, we need at least as much as we had in the second quarter, and hopefully a little more. So a $3 trillion package for the third quarter that would extend the $600 unemployment benefit, another round of checks for households with incomes of $75,000 or less, with additional support based on the size of the household, another round of payroll support for smaller firms. It should include substantial funding for state and local governments, because given their declining revenues and balanced budget amendments, they're on the verge of laying off tens of thousands of people. We're talking about police and sanitation workers and teachers. One of the other things we're seeing right now is that the savings rate has skyrocketed. And that's what happens when people get very nervous. It's also what happens when people lose their health insurance, because they have to save in case they get sick, especially in a pandemic. So part of the recovery has to be universal health care coverage.
I know government's a dirty word now, but as we saw with FDR, let's say we got a vaccine. We learned some alphabet soup things from the WPA to the TVA and all the rest. It's going to take government, won't it, to, once people can safely go back out again, to get people back to work here, whether it be big infrastructure projects or public work things. It'll take a reimagining of what things could be kind of now to figure out, once we get people out here, we got to, spend money hand over fist to start building stuff and putting people back to work until private industry can take over.
I know the Biden campaign and the task forces around it are doing this thinking right now, both with certainly about infrastructure and infrastructure beyond roads and bridges. We're talking about 5G broadband across the country. We're talking about new public transit systems. We're talking about modernizing the electric grid. All of these things create jobs, make businesses more efficient, and do what we need to do in order to reduce the risks of global warming.
It's a tall task ahead here, but the lesson we even saw in 2008 is whatever your instincts is, don't go small. You got to go big right now. Let's not now all of a sudden have religion when it comes to deficits and debt. It's pretty hysterical that all of a sudden now we're getting prudence. But anyway, fascinating article, Robert. And again, you guys can check it out in Washington Monthly. I appreciate a few minutes.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here, Richard.
You as well. When we come back, everyone, as COVID continues to spread, nursing homes, they keep getting hit particularly hard by this virus. After the break, a woman who I think has been doing the best writing on this, she'll join us. She's taking a look at facilities. She reports for The Guardian, discussing just how bad the situation is and whether or not We could have prevented this situation if more people had just been paying attention.